I'm Emily Raquette, and you're listening to the AMPLIFY Show, episode number 68. Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing great. As promised, I have another interview today that I hope will inspire you and excite you heading into Lent. We're just a week away. And I'm so curious how you do Lent. If you do any specific studies or family devotionals or what type of 40-day sacrifice you make, shoot me a message. I'd love to know. I didn't grow up Catholic or celebrating Lent. I always thought it was pretty cool. I had a couple of friends that would make a fuss over not eating gummy bears or pop. I'm from Michigan, from the Midwest, so we call it pop. But I realize now, as I've grown older and I have my own family, just how beautiful the liturgical calendar is and the seasons and the rhythms. Anyway, I'm excited about Lent. I started a bit of my Lent journey on January 17th with a program called Magnify 90. It will end at Easter, and that's what I'm talking about today on the show. I have Kaylene Brown. She's the creator of Magnify 90. It's a 90-day spiritual program for women. She was inspired to create this because there's another program that's growing in popularity in the church for the last couple of years called Exodus 90. And a lot of women have been trying to do it, but that was really designed for men. So she created Magnify 90. And in the beginning of the interview, I didn't have my microphone placed very well, so it was hard to hear. So I cut this all out. But we also talk about the pilgrimage some of us will be making out to the middle of Kansas for a retreat coming up in a few weeks. Specifically, it's a book. You can get Magnify 90 on Amazon. It has 90 daily devotions, so you can read it one a day. It also involves a whole slew of things. You do daily prayer, mass and reconciliation, and abstaining from sweets, entertainment, regular music, so like worship or gospel music is fine, social media except for work, shopping for anything other than the essentials. So no Amazon, a big pause on the Amazon. I've been doing this really imperfectly, I will add, quite imperfectly. And if you follow me on social media, you'll know that because I've made a couple posts that weren't exactly for work. And it's kind of funny because I can maybe justify anything I do on social media for work, but I've been trying really hard to just remove a lot of the tech distraction out of my life. And that will be an interview for next week, specifically about that. But in this interview, we also talk about growing in virtues like humility and why prayer can be so hard in our productivity-obsessed world. And, well, you can hear the rest for yourself. We're just going to dive right in. Here's my interview with Kaylene Brown.
Magnify 90 came to be basically as I've grown in my understanding of what could be called the complementary nature of men and women. So men and women are not the same. And I think a lot of the feminist movement was really moving towards if we could just be treated the same as men and just have the same jobs and do the same work, if we all did the same thing. If men did what women do and women do what men do and everybody just becomes the same, then we'll have equality. And as I've grown in my understanding of like truly being home in my skin and my femininity, which was not the case growing up. As I've come to understand that, I recognize that's actually harming both genders because men, they are inherently different and women are inherently different. And it's not unequal for us to recognize the differences. And so there's this program within the Catholic Church, although non-Catholics have started doing it. I've heard from men that it's extended beyond the church, called Exodus 90. And Exodus 90 was really this idea of men reclaiming their masculine spirituality, finding freedom from attachments. And when they were doing that, some women in their circles saw the benefits it was providing to the men, and they wanted that too. Rightly so, because I think we all want freedom from attachments. We all want to not feel bogged down by so much of the world's just impression upon us. And so women started doing the Exodus 90. And if you go to the Exodus 90 website, it's all about brotherhood. It's all about men rise up and lead your families. It's all about men. And there's even a little thing on there that's like, not for women. I mean, you have to dig pretty hard to find that, but it's on there. And I just felt like this is not okay because we women, in the name of equality, we trample on so much of what men are trying to do. And then we end up fighting against each other instead of working with each other and finding each other's strengths, which in different circles, a man's strength might not be what the classic like masculinity thing is, and the women's strengths might not be the classic feminine strength, but we have to find our unique gifts and the way they work together. So Magnify 90 really came about as an answer for women who were seeking to practice asceticism, and which is to say self-denial, and women who were striving to grow on their path towards holiness and just wanting to rise above so much of the attachments. So I wrote Magnify, which is a book of 91, actually. It's supposed to be 90, but I wrote a like recap last day, 91 reflections. And that's based in writings of historical women, which the Catholic Church has deemed saints. And it's also based on scripture and then also the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So those documents really weave together. And the Catechism is basically just scripture and saint quotes mixed together with some concepts that tie those pieces together. So by quoting the Catechism, I'm effectively doubly quoting saints in scripture, because a lot of the Catechism passages also link, or not link because books aren't linked in that way. Right. They also connect to scripture. Yeah. So it's just getting women diving into those texts. And then my reflections kind of tie those together to virtue, because virtue is so important. Even from a secular standpoint, virtue allows us to reach our highest end. And so Magnify, to get back to your question, was a response basically, but has now become its own thing. And I really don't call it Exodus 90 for women because it is so unique and stands apart. But for those women seeking something like Exodus 90, this is their complementary option while not kind of trampling on this like masculinity kind of program for men.
Yes. I wish I knew how I even discovered Magnify 90, but I want to say it was in a Google search or something where an article popped up of why Exodus 90 is not for women. Like there's really strong SEO on that. And I don't know what my terms were where I found it, but it is very much like for people who haven't heard of an Exodus 90 or haven't done a program like this, but they've heard of, let's say like 75 hard or like a secular physical challenge. And I did that, or I tried to do it. I'd say I got to like day 33 or so a couple of years ago. And I love a good challenge like that. And I didn't realize why I liked it so much. I think part of it is I like the boundaries. I like the rules. I like putting myself in discomfort to grow. So I understood all of that, but there's always like something missing. It always felt like it was lacking a little something. And either that's why I didn't complete it, or it certainly helped. There's absolutely benefits to it. I always felt like it was just lacking something. And so when I came upon reading about Magnify 90, I was like, it was like a light bulb went off. Like, it's like, this is like 75 hard, but you're not doing it for yourself. You're not doing it to enhance your own ego, to feel good about yourself. Like, look at me and how great I am. Now, you're obviously doing it for a much bigger purpose. And that was exactly what I was seeking. So I was so glad I found it. And, heading into it, I got my journal. I have a habit tracker and I'm like, all right. I was so excited to write out all of what I'm calling my daily habits. You list out, kind of the parameters or the rules of Magnify 90. And I listed them out because I was going to be so proud of every day. I will check them off. And I think it was like day 1 or 2, the virtue is humility, which I needed so much. It was so good to have that come first, because in one of those first readings, you talk about how this isn't a like challenge to check off your days and feel good about what you've accomplished. I thought, she knows me. Wait, I've never met before. She like can see in my habit tracking journal. I have absolutely tossed out the habit tracker because this has been the most imperfect experience, although so much growth happening, a lot of grace happening for me. It's like the opposite of let's check off how good I have been every day in a way, but a lot of spiritual growth. So that has been really nice.
I do think that the spiritual component is so necessary, because when we turn in on ourselves and we have that egoism, we have that prideful attitude about us, it's not lifting others up. And I think that our happiness that we all seek, all of us want to be happy, right? And even those who are very melancholic and don't actually say they want to be happy, they actually do, if they're honest with themselves. Like that's our human nature. We all seek this happiness. And when you're focused so much inside and marking off your list and doing those things for yourself, your happiness is limited. You're finite because you as a human are finite. You are not transcendent. You're not divine. You're not all-knowing. All those words that we could use for God. We're not that. But when we look beyond ourselves, it's limitless. There's billions of people in the world. And when we do things for the good of those around us, it also lifts us up. So our happiness is extended to the nth degree. Like it's impossible to reach the end of that happiness. So I'm happy that you found it. And I'm happy that you're finding this to be a humbling experience, because for me in my journey, humility was the crux. It was like the transition moment. I lived for all of my adolescence and my early 20s for myself. And when I learned about humility, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what I need. And I sought it with wild abandon because of how much it transformed my mental health. I really struggled, and I still occasionally do. Like, mental health is a huge thing, and we're getting off topic. I'm sorry, Emily, but mental health alone is really aided by humility, I think, because it takes you outside yourself.
Yeah, I would say motherhood, becoming a mother, is a humbling experience. Yes. Experiencing that, like the first time you give birth and you're holding this life in your hands that you realize you have been given and you're responsible for. And I guess motherhood every day for me is a humbling experience. I'll admit. Same. It changes, it evolves. And there's a part in that week where you dive into humility, where you talk about it's important to be careful who you even talk to this experience to, and how you talk about it, and not to talk about it too much. And from the get-go, I was very quiet about it. I think the first I've done is I kind of posted that I'd be interviewing you today, and then I'll even hold this interview for a while, I think until maybe right around Lent starts for other people, because that could be timely. Because on one hand, I want to share it with people, but it's a very personal and almost like intimate experience that I'm going through that I don't want to, I always want to keep it in its right place, because you can very quickly make it about being good and, look how good I am and I'm checking my boxes, or just that you're even doing it. There's so much you just got to keep coming back to that place of humility, because otherwise then you won't reap the benefit. You lose your priority in it.
Yeah. I mean, it's 90 days. So, yeah. You have this wave, if you will, of like the first wave and the second wave and kind of like this third wave. And as you work your way through the book towards the end, there's a transition in my writing where I start to talk more about what do we do after. Like right now, we're still diving into like, this is the middle, like we're in it. And as you get to those latter 4 weeks or so, you start to begin to think about, what about now? How do I talk about what I've learned? How do I grapple with this new knowledge, this new experience that I have? And then you can really turn it outward. I've had some people approach me via email and ask some questions about like, I want to blast this from the rooftop, effectively is what they're saying. And that's why I included it in the book of like hone in on this, like cultivate it, fan the flame, if you will, let it build. And then let's discuss how we move forward, because maybe 75 hard is something I've never done it, but I've had people I know do it. And I think, are you supposed to, correct me if I'm wrong, are you supposed to post on social media that you're doing it to hold yourself accountable? Like post a picture or something?
I think it's encouraged. You are supposed to take a picture of yourself every day, because it's absolutely a big part of it is physical transformation. Although it's not, I do think he says in there, that's not like the end goal, but it's to prove to yourself you can kind of do anything. And for some people, you'll need to see it, because otherwise you won't notice your transformation over that time. But absolutely, there's a hashtag, there's a screensaver, you can screenshot and show where you are in it. The community aspect is very much on social media. And this concept, because I used to mostly interview entrepreneurs and like biohackers, and this concept of take cold showers and get yourself uncomfortable is very popular, but this is nothing new. If we look at it historically and through the church, the concept of making yourself purposely uncomfortable is not new biohacking tactic?
So what's interesting about me is that I came to writing that. I think everything in my life just like was building up to prepare me for writing, because you can never write about what you don't know. You know, that's like a cliche we hear in our writing classes in high school and college, but you have to know the content to be able to write it. So I just really think my spiritual journey was leading me to this place to be able to write it, but so was my emotional and physical journeys. I think all three of those pieces were necessary for the author of this to go through so that I could kind of foresee what might happen for women. And so I came to this writing with having done, I think, like 3 Whole30s. Are you familiar with Whole30?
Yes. Yeah. I've never done it, but yeah.
Well, so Whole30 effectively is diet based, right? Like they wouldn't say it's a diet though, because everyone is afraid of labels on their thing. They don't want the label, but it's giving up a lot of foods, but they want you to focus on the things you can eat. So you can eat vegetables, you can eat fruits, you can eat meat, you can eat nuts and healthy fats, but you don't eat sugars, a lot of carbs, you don't eat grains, you're effectively super paleo. And I had completed that several times to writing this. And so I had those ideas of what is nourishing for our bodies when I was writing this, because like I said, all three of those components have to really work together for the human person to feel whole and complete and just like on this correct journey. So I had completed those kind of check mark tasks. And I've run a marathon and given birth several times, one unmedicated, and like done these hard things.
Yeah.
So I'd had that aspect of physicality, but I've also been brought very low and not things of my choosing. So not going outside in the -2 for a 75 hard workout, and not going into the cold shower just to like woman up and do it. I've also had an emergency C-section where I really thought I was going to die and like not wake up. And I've also had 3 knee surgeries and an ectopic pregnancy emergency surgery, and these hard things that have been sent my way that I had no control over. So with that in mind, I recognize that to truly be prepared for anything that the world might throw at us, we have to practice. We have to practice this asceticism. We have to practice this denying ourselves, making ourselves uncomfortable, so that when those things come our way, they don't disrupt our peace. I mean, sure, we'll be upset and we'll be sad and that, but our core will be resilient, and our core will have this idea of like, this is not the end of the world. And if it is, I have faith and I believe that I will hopefully go to heaven, but those hard things coming our way that we can't control, they need us to be resilient. And so we have to practice these little denials, like, hey, I'm not going to have sweets for 90 days. And that's going to help my body practice. And I'm not going to eat between meals. And I'm not going to touch my phone for the first 2 hours I'm awake, or I'm not going to have social media because that's clouding my brain. And I need to be able to focus to the people around me. So to your point, I think that humans desire those things. They just haven't always connected the faith points, and they haven't seen that that allows them to go beyond themselves and serve others in a better way. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, well, I think throughout history, and with saints in particular, or you even look at people who live their life in service and take vows of poverty and deny themselves certain modern worldly comforts for a reason that, I mean, certainly now all of these things that we're doing, we can point to even scientific ways that they benefit us. Not eating sweets, of course, or not being on social media. There are scientific benefits to that for our bodies and our brains, even our mental health. But the aspect too that I find so inspiring, and this is where your prompts or journal entries each day kind of lead you to consider, is also that we're not now just automatically falling back on these vices that we might have we didn't even notice we had, because it is just so ingrained in our culture, whether it's opening the fridge or scrolling, our phone. And when you take that away, you're kind of left with like, oh, well, what now? And it helps you turn to God. It helps you grow in prayer. I'll say for me, one of the hardest parts is that you're supposed to work in that half hour of prayer. And part of it is just the logistics of having 3 kids and a husband with a broken leg, all these things going on. But also it's because I haven't truly learned how to spend that much time in prayer and how to make that happen. But I'm sure a lot of it is just from the noise of the world and from all these voices that I've lived with. And taking that to even 90 days seems like a lot of time. But I keep telling myself, as imperfect as I'm doing this program, if you can do it imperfectly, I don't know if there's a perfect or imperfect.
Everyone does it imperfectly. That's the goal.
Yeah. So I think I got to the rosary mention. I was like, oh, I haven't done a rosary yet, but it's all right because this is 90 days. And I do feel you need that amount of time to even get yourself, or at least for me and for someone who a half hour of prayer a day is not the norm, wasn't the norm in my life. I need this amount of time to even get to there. So maybe I'm hoping that maybe closer to day 90, it will be feeling a little more like a rhythm and a little more like a normal, and I won't say perfect, but I'll be feeling a little less imperfect about it.
Yeah, I think that prayer is hard for people who are recovering perfectionists and people who are really focused on productivity, which I think I listened to one of your podcasts and you talked to a woman about like time work balance. And we are so focused as a culture on seeing those results, and 30 minutes of prayer a day is hard to justify because you're not likely to see tangible results from it. And so it's easy for us to say, I am going to move this to the bottom of my list because I need to accomplish these things. But as you go through the book, you'll read about some saints in there who say, if you've got a bunch of things to accomplish, you need to pray more because that helps you accomplish those things in alignment with the will of God. So we're not doing anything in our life solely for ourselves. And prayer helps us come back to that. Prayer centers us. It helps us focus on the things that really matter. And it's hard to know what really matters if you're always doing things. You've got to step back and assess that. And to me, that is prayer. Prayer is that. It is communing with God, seeking what our good is, seeking what we actually need to do. So to find that work-life balance and to do first things first and do the right thing at the right time, we have to be quiet. We have to make ourselves small and look into what God is asking us to do, not just what our to-do list is asking us to do. So when you're trying to find those 30 minutes of prayer, prioritize them and watch how the rest of your world transforms around you.
It feels a bit magical when you're not used to it, because I will say I can't think of a time where I've been like, oh, well, if I just wouldn't have spent that time in prayer today, then I wouldn't be having this problem. Or, oh, well, I'm late because I was praying today. That has never happened. And anytime I have, as hard as it is, be like, slow down or have that moment of prayer, only good comes of it, even if it's just a shift in my perspective or feeling of I've given up a bit of that burden that I was feeling on my shoulders. Only good things can come out of that. And even though it sounds counterintuitive, like, no, if I have a really busy day and I don't think I can get it all done, or my kids are driving me crazy and everyone needs me and I don't get a second to myself. If you can find that time for prayer, even as I'm still learning what that means for me, only good things have come out of it.
Right. You have to nourish your soul. You know, we make time to eat. We nourish our bodies in a healthy way. We are body and soul united. We're not just a body. We're not just a soul. So we have to nourish both things. So
going back to what you're talking about, the feminine versus the masculine, and how you created this program specifically out of that, because there was this need. There's nothing created specifically for women. That I really appreciated, because that was also the missing piece. With the 75 Hard felt very masculine. It is, I think it was created by a former Navy SEAL, even. Maybe not, I forget, but I had interviewed quite a few of them during that time. And it's very like, go, you can do anything, which might be true, but we just take things in differently. To deny our inherent differences and really our gifts that make us unique and different from men. I feel is just such a disservice to us as women. And it's a very unpopular thing to say right now. It goes against all of the popular culture of what being a feminist even is. But I would think being a feminist is more embracing and protecting and fighting for and loving all the characteristics that truly make us a woman, not taking those away so that we could be more like a man. I mean, and there's so many aspects of that you could look to.
Correct. And to those who like search out the book or see it, like the subtitle is Pursuing Virtue as a Feminine Genius, which was a term that Pope John Paul II used in a letter that he wrote to women, speaking to the four main components that he saw and others have talked about within femininity, which one is receptivity. And that gets to what he talked about regarding theology of the body, and that women's bodies are made to be receptive, right? Like babies grow in our bodies, we're receptive to that other life. And if, we're also receptive to our spouses in that way, in the marital act, we also are generous, because we really are so other focused in our femininity of serving others and just have that heart for taking care. That's part of our maternity, which is another piece of the feminine genius, in that even if we're not biological or physical mothers, and I think that people get confused when they think maternity. Well, it's like, oh, I don't feel very maternal, Well, yeah, you do foster life in others. You would be surprised if you really stepped back and analyzed the way in which you try to bring the good out of others. And that is maternity, of like fostering those lives around you and encouraging people. That is a natural component of the feminine genius. And then the next one is sensitivity. And I don't mean sensitivity in the crying at movies, you're so sensitive kind of thing, but the sensitivity that like you care. And maybe women would fight back against this and say, I don't have any of those. It's like, well, I think you actually probably do, but maybe you've been so focused for so long on fighting that feminine nature because you think that the world will trample on you if you don't, and that you won't get far in your career, or you won't get far as far as respect goes. So I think we've suppressed a lot of that as a gender, and we have to, like you said, like it's against what I think a lot of the world says right now, but we'll find way more happiness when we play into our strengths. And one woman's feminine genius is not the same as another's feminine. We're all unique. And I acknowledge that in the book. So this book and this 90 days is like a cookie cutter situation. Like you are doing the same thing as everyone else through it. But the goal is by the end of the 90 days, you've kind of learned and discerned what your particular needs are and what your particular gifts are. And then you get to the 91, and you're ready to move into your uniqueness and the way that God is calling you to live out your feminine genius. But these 90 days are pretty set in stone, and they're like that. So I think women that maybe come to it, they expect, I don't know what they expect. I think I've heard a lot. People get kind of put off sometimes by it, but I also get a ton of good feedback of women being like, thank you for this, because I recognize women shouldn't be doing Exodus 90, or I recognize that I was wrong for so long on what my life needed to look like. And here they are journeying as sisters in Christ and trying to grow deeper in their faith life and in their virtue. And I'm just really excited to be a part of it. I never thought growing up that this would be kind of my project, if you will, but I'm honored to journey with other women as they go through this. And the need is great. Like the third most popular traffic driver to my website is Exodus 90 for women. So women are still out there searching for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone who's offended by it or doesn't resonate, or they don't think that any of those traits apply to them, we have to consider the worldly conditioning that we've been put through over the past few decades, especially, and just consider a surrender to that maybe, just maybe, what we've been kind of taught to believe about ourselves might not be true. And once you can open that up a little bit, like it's just, you crack it open,
I mean, that's how I ultimately discovered you and Magnify 90. It was just like from reading and reading more and learning more and sitting with that. And it eventually just leads you, I think, to a really beautiful place. And hopefully you're finding, truth along the way. And it's hard because it shines a light on so many ways that we maybe previously lived or beliefs that we held really tight. So there's a lot at play. I think you just have to be patient in the process and see what gets revealed.
Yeah, patience is really important. I just think there's that idea of freedom. And I wanted to say that freedom is not what a lot of people think it is. And from the classical philosophical kind of worldview regarding freedom, to be truly free, you can't be attached to these worldly things, because you might say, well, I'm free to do whatever I want. I'm free to be on my phone all the time. That's my choice. I'm free to be, eating whatever comes my way. I'm free to drink a ton on the weekend and just live my best life. Like these ideas of like, you do you. That's actually not true freedom. And for millennia has not been understood as freedom. Like freedom is actually the ability to say no to things and to not, it's to have that capacity of detachment. Like I'm truly free when I can look at that cake and say, no, thank you. I'm truly free when I can be presented with this opportunity to be completely lazy and say, no, that's unhealthy for me. Like to have this detachment to all of these things that the world says will make me happy. That's where this freedom is coming in. And so many people are misguided. They think that if they just like lay around and binge watch 4 hours of whatever the latest Netflix is, that's their choice and they're free to do that. They're actually a slave to that. They're slaved to their sloth. They're slave to this show. It's addictive to them. And the creators of that show know that. And I just really hope that women journeying through Magnify 90 are recognizing all the ways that our culture tries to enslave them in these secret ways to things that don't allow them to fulfill their potential. So I just wanted to speak into that a little bit regarding why someone would practice asceticism. It's so that they become truly free, even if they didn't come to it from a spiritual standpoint, but that they came to it more for the philosophical reasons of finding that freedom. They'll get there. Like you said, patience on the spiritual aspect. You'll get there. All three of these are like a tripod, right? Emotional, spiritual, physical. And the goal of Magnify 90 is really to help us learn to balance those appropriately through the eyes of God.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I'm really enjoying journeying with you and with hundreds or thousands of other women around the world.
At this point, it is thousands.
Yeah.
It's really exciting.
That's great. And, we're going to link everything in our show notes and how we can find you. I would want to add for anyone that is listening, but let's say they're not Catholic or they don't have a regular prayer or faith practice. And that part makes them feel like this wouldn't be for them. That I would say that's not true. I think Magnify 90, you open the book, get the free sample on Kindle. Or I ordered the Kindle and then I was like, I also need the physical copy because I need to be able to highlight and reread and hold it in my hands, that tangible feeling. I would say give it a try, read it a little bit and just see how it feels, because I don't think, I know you designed it to be for Catholic women. I feel like it can be for all women.
Yeah. What's interesting too is there are more things out there from a secular standpoint on the feminine genius that I didn't realize were out there until women started emailing me asking what I meant by the feminine genius. And then I go down a rabbit hole of searching, and there actually are secular ideas of the feminine genius, and they're out there. So yeah, anyone could come to this and take from it what you will.
Yeah.
And it can be a piece of your journey, a springboard. And I do know from the men's side with the Exodus 90 and conversations I had with them, yeah, they have non-Catholics that are participating in it. And it's kind of beautiful to see the universality of these transcendent truths and the way that God does invite us all into a deeper relationship with him, regardless of our faith tradition, because truth speaks truly, or there's nothing true. I didn't make that up, by the way. That was Aquinas, but it's true that like he is truth. God is truth. And so every one of us has a piece of that truth in us. So you will find that. to the ladies who are listening and considering this. You will find that. And if you're a gentleman listening, go check out Exodus 90, because I've seen so much fruit in my husband. He's done it. I think this is like his 6th time now. And every time he learns a little bit and he grows a little bit differently. And it's been wonderful for our marriage and our kids. And I have nothing but great things to say about Exodus 90 as well. And the two complement each other in a really great way. So I encourage anyone to look into it and see.
That's great. Well, and thanks for telling me. You could drop saint quotes on me all day and I'd just be like, wow, Kaylene just had so much wisdom, but I'd probably grab one and use it for a graphic and you'd have to be like, Emily, wait, that wasn't me.
I do like to attribute, you've got to attribute things to where they go. And that was my favorite part actually of Magnify, was just the beautiful way that the scripture and the catechism and the saint quotes from their books have all tied together and come through. And it's just been really awesome to learn. I knew about a lot of saints, but when I was writing this book and kind of researching and seeing things come together, I learned so much about the ways that these women wrote and practiced virtue. And it's just inspiring to see that's how they have lived their life and the legacy that they've provided. And I want that too, but in my own unique way. So yeah, attribution to other people is always really important. But I do have a priest friend who I hope listens to this podcast and hears this, that he told me years ago as my spiritual director, when I was writing this book, he said, the best theologians plagiarize. And I'm like, oh yeah. And he's like, yeah, because there's nothing new, right? Like these concepts have been written about for centuries and centuries. So someone has probably already said it. So I just thought it was funny when he said that. I was like, best theologians plagiarize. Okay.
Yes. And I also love that you didn't know about feminine genius. Cause I remember being a little confused by that I was like, wait, so is this Catholic or is this New Age? I was like, wait, what's going on here? Am I being tricked? Is this a little woo? There's an entire industry and books and podcasts about feminine genius. It's very like, I don't know, feel your chakras and this. I don't even know. I don't know all the terms, but there's totally that entire industry built around it. And if that's confusing people, because I kind of want to use it in the title of this podcast, it is the subtitle of your book after all. And then I wonder if some people are gonna be like, wait, so is this like a woo? Although it's probably going to attract people to then listen who maybe otherwise wouldn't. So that could be interesting.
It is true. And I think that's happened with the book too. And then I don't know.
Some people are either highly disappointed or they're inspired.
Mystery can be good. People can be surprised. I had a sweatshirt that said feminine genius on it that I have an Etsy shop and it was on there. And anyways, I was wearing it at this women's conference that I went to, and this lady was like, does that mean you want women priests? And I'm like, whoa. No. Because that's like a debate within the Catholic Church. And it's been put to bed several times that we're not having women priests. But she thought when I had a shirt that said feminine genius, but yet I was at a Catholic women conference, she looked at me like, what's your story? I need to know if I can talk to you, friend or foe. I'm like, no. Here's what it means. And this is what it is, and about the genius of women. And so, it can be a controversial kind of idea, but that's good a little bit.
Yeah, you're taking back the power of the phrase, which I like, because I think you're putting it back in its right context. So I am going to use it in the title, and that's where we're going to leave it.
Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah. Well, Kaylene, it was so nice to chat with you. Where can we find you if we want to learn more? What do you think the first step is if someone wants to learn more about Magnify 90?
mag90.com. So just for brevity's sake, mag90.com.
Thanks so much for hanging out and listening to today's episode. If you were inspired by what you heard, I'd love if you shared it on social, give it a 5-star review on iTunes, and spread the word. But more than being inspired, I hope you're motivated to take action. Remember to just start. Take those steps today to get to where you want to be. Connect with me over on Instagram at Emily Riquette. That's Emily, Richett. See you next time.